I'll ask Father to say a prayer in a minute, but I just wanted to introduce him to you. His name is Father Robert McTagg. He's a Jesuit. He's stationed right now down at Campion Center in Weston. Father's an academic. He's been teaching quite a bit. And he's written a book called I Have Someone to Tell You. The Jesuit heralds the gospel. I Have Someone to Tell You. It's available at Amazon, paperback. There's an electronic version. It's very highly recommended. I Have Someone to Tell You. So, Father, he's going to be talking about the media and its effects on the youth. Father's not a stranger to media. He writes a weekly column in Alitalia, which is an online Catholic news service and information website founded in 2012, and it's based in 6 languages nationwide. It's founded in France. Alitalia, excuse me. So his column comes out every Wednesday morning, anywhere from anytime between midnight and 11 o'clock in the morning. Father also is host and co-host to a number of programs on the radio, including Relevant Radio, whose corporate name is Immaculate Heart Media. And that's a radio network pretty well known in the United States. It mainly broadcasts talk radio and religious programming involving the Catholic Church. Also, there's one called Station of the Cross. That's a podcast. He also is on Catholic Current, another program of the Station of the Cross, and also a podcast called The Furrow. And on that program, there's been a few weeks discussing this very issue that we're going to be talking about tonight. And they recommend some books to go along with the program. How to Break Up with Your Phone, Digital Detox, The Power of Silence Against the Dictatorship of Noise. And that's by Cardinal Robert Sarah. I'm sure you've heard of that one. The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. The Dumbest Generation, How the Digital Age Stupefies Young Americans and jeopardizes our youth. Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business. And another one is called Silicon Snake Oil, Second Thoughts on the Information Highway. Father is also a member of the National Ethics Board of Catholic Medical Association, and recently spoke in Albany, Rochester, to a group of doctors on Catholic ethics. So I present you Father Robert McTagg.
Thank you very much, brother. Let's start with prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Almighty God, fountain of all wisdom, inspire those who teach and those who learn, that rejoicing in the knowledge of your truth, we may come to love and serve you, who live and reign forever and ever. Amen. Amen. Our Lady, seat of wisdom. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, many of you are parents, grandparents. Many of you are teachers. You work with youth. Let me ask you a question. What's the most likely way to get your kids to roll their eyes? It's when you tell them something that they don't want to hear, that they've heard very often, and they're really convinced that you don't know what you're talking about. And I like to try to play that eye-rolling game when I talk to young people. If I get, say, a group of high school kids together, boys and girls, I say, hey guys, I want to talk to you about video games. And all the guys roll their eyes, because here's the man who's obviously over 30. He's going to talk about video games are bad, you run the risk of having fun, God doesn't like that. And what do I know? Because they all assume that Father lives in the sacristy. and he only communicates with a quill pen and invisible ink, so he doesn't know anything about anything. And then I start talking about the different types of platforms and the different types of games and the different types of controllers, and they look at each other nervously and say, he knows. He does know. And then I talk to the young ladies and I say, I want to talk to you about the music you're listening to, and they all roll their eyes. Because again, here comes the man with the gray hair who probably only listened to music on an AM station on the one day that he was young. He's been old since forever. And then I start naming names of artists and albums and concerts and costumes. And then I asked him, do you want me to start talking about lyrics? And then, how does he know? How does he know? S.J. me. I know. I have JMPs. I have Jesuit mystical powers. I know these things. But more than that, I have a brother-in-law who's been a major player in the video game design industry for over 15 years. And my sister, who's a one-woman civilization, has done a lot of work in the fashion industry and stays current with popular culture. So I have my information, so I know what I'm talking about. Now, some years ago, when giving kids cell phones was still a relatively new thing, I would often be invited to a family home for dinner and have a very lovely meal. And then I would always wait for what's the big question they want to ask Father during the meal. And they would say, well, what about the kids want to have cell phones, what do you think? And they all look expectant. Whose side is it going to be on? Whose side is it going to be on? And I'd say, well, you know, for safety's sake in the world we live in now, it kind of makes sense to me that, you know, a young person might want to have a phone for emergencies. And now on the kid's Christmas card it says, and then I add, but not a smartphone. And all the parents start high-fiving and the kids are scratching me off the Christmas card. So in talking about the media, in particular social media and video games, whose side am I on? Am I Father Happy Have a Good Time? You know, best friends with Father Cheerful down, you know, who's the pastor of St. Typical's down the road, and everything is fine and all are welcome, and, you know, as long as they're not killing each other, let them do their little thumb thing. Well, no, I'm not on that side. And I'm not on the side of we need to lock them in the basement and not let them out until we arrange a good marriage for them. I'm not on that side either. I'm in the virtuous middle. And let me offer you a few paradoxes, because I want to avoid easy categorization. I've got my smartphone with me, and I have my podcasts and my radio shows, and I Skype around the world, etc., etc. And I try to rebel against the modern world by writing with a fountain pen. And when I shave, and I do, I really do, I use a straight razor. Just to have that little resistance, to have an appreciation of craft, and when times were a bit slower. And I was on the cusp of the computer explosion. When I graduated from high school, my really cool graduation gift from my parents when I went off to college was a portable typewriter. Now, most of my students wouldn't know a typewriter if they stubbed their toe on it. And then I go further. My first computer at work, and people think I was found in an envelope by the side of the road marked Jesuit beside add water and stir. And then when the students talk to me, they say, Father, before this Jesuit thing, you actually had a life. Yes, and I still do. But back in the day, to use Carmelite language, before I left the world, I was in business, and my first computer was an AT&T desktop, because that's all there was desktops. And the floppy disks were floppy. Do you remember? Oh, see? Some of the people with hairs like mine think I had it. And I had a hard drive, a 10 megabyte hard drive. And I could write a few lines in BASIC, and I thought I was a god. And it has been for better and for worse. It's not really either or. Has been woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. And I say that repeatedly where the two cameras with the lights on pointing at me. They're woven into every part of our lives now. So the real question is, do we live with them or not? Because we have to. The question is, shall we live with them well? And the answer is yes, because we have to. How do we do that? And how do we teach the young people in our care to live with them well? Because for a variety of reasons, these electronic devices are largely designed to be lived with not well. They're designed to be addictive substances. And we can go into all of the brain chemistry that's involved in that. Instead, I'll spare you. There's a book called Hooked by McElhaney, and that shows how the adolescent brain works. By the way, if Harry Potter or your fairy godmother waved a magic wand and all of a sudden teenagers couldn't get sexually transmitted diseases or unintended pregnancies, sex outside of marriage would still be a bad idea, because the brain gets rewired during those sexual encounters. And if you become promiscuous and you have repeated sexual encounters where you've got the physiological experience of pleasure, but not the life experience of bonding, then the body stops looking for the bonding, but becomes addicted to the pursuit of the thrill and the pleasant. And like any addiction, the ordinary becomes routine, becomes boring, becomes unsatisfying, becomes not enough, and you've got to up the dosage, up the dosage, up the dosage. That's true of not only three-dimensional real-life promiscuity, it's also true of pornography as well. There's a website, it's not entirely family-friendly, not lurid, called yourbrainonporn.com. And this gentleman says, look, I'm not a moralist, I'm not a theologian, I am a scientist, and you have a right to know what it is that you do to your brain when you look at streaming pornography. It's the rough equivalent of taking a syringe full of heroin and sticking it into your eyeball and scratching your brain. And there is nothing in nature that can protect, especially the adolescent developing male brain, from the absolute neurochemical, physiological, and emotional onslaught of streaming pornography. There's also a book called The Drug for the New Millennium, book for the second edition, and that's kind of an encyclopedic account of why it works the way it does. Very simply, nerves that fire together wire together. If you're a coach, you know that you have to teach a kid to throw a ball 10,000 times until he can do it without thinking. And they say amateurs practice till they get it right. Professionals practice till they can't get it wrong. That's the power of habit. And what happens with the developing brain is that it wants to learn, and it wants to remember the things that were really pleasant and go back to them and go back to them and build on them and build on them. And that's true not only for good habits and for virtue and athletics and skills like handwriting and driving. It's true for video games as potentially benign as Minecraft, and as certainly vile as Grand Theft Auto. It's true for staring at cute pictures of other people's cats online for hours at a time, and it's true for looking at more lurid things online for hours at a time. That power of repetition and that the oceanic depth of unlimited resource. There's always a something else. There's always another. There's always a just one more, just one more, just one more. And that's the power of downloadable songs and MP3 players. It's the power of streaming video on Netflix. It's the power of pornography. It's the power of video games. It's the power of Facebook. And no one is immune from its power. Absolutely no one is immune from its power. I had a friend who got an Xbox game platform, and he started to refer to it as the pipe, as if it were a crack pipe. How you doing, Fred? Spent the weekend with the pipe, Father. Eyes were bloodshot, ate junk food, didn't sleep. And he was talking like he was a meth addict, but he was a video game addict. we can do better than that. We can certainly do better than that. So we have a sense of being surrounded by a technology that is unavoidable and that can certainly be used for good. That's why I'm speaking into the microphone and we've got little magic story boxes lit up like Christmas, because it can certainly be used for good. I remember sitting in an airport in St. Louis carrying on a conversation with a friend in Manhattan and a friend in Singapore simultaneously. That would have been inconceivable to my parents 15 years ago, certainly unintelligible to my grandparents, a simple matter of fact to my nieces today. And it's not going to slow down. So what we need to do is to have a sense of what the challenges are. There can be a great source of opportunity for learning, for diversion, for communication, for truly innocent play, for the development of true networks, and that's to the good. And it can also be, as my students would say, an enormous time suck, a black hole. You know, just say you're doing something innocent, you know, you're chatting on Facebook, and you had your morning cup of coffee, and you blink, and it's 3:30 in the afternoon, and you realize you're hungry, and the whole room smells like stale coffee, and you don't remember how you got there. There are physiological and emotional and psychological reasons for that. So you're dealing with a very, very powerful substance. What do you do with powerful substances? You control it, understand how it works, how it can be used safely, and keep it in very well-defined parameters. And if you've got young people in your care, then you give them a great deal of accountability and structure and limitations and alternatives. There was a case I read about a few months ago, somewhere on the West Coast. Some genius who probably thinks that penmanship is passé decided that all the sixth graders in the school district really need a tablet, and that's going to send them on the path to happiness ever after. And some parents said, you know, my 11-year-old used to have a life, and now she has a tablet. Oh my goodness. And we're assuming that she's just looking at age-appropriate things and not talking to online predators, etc. Well, they told Sally at the end of the school day, well, Sally, you're going to hand over your tablet to Mom and Dad, and then you'll get it back for school on Monday. She reacted with such out-of-control, nearly superhuman violence that when the police were called to restrain her after she physically assaulted her parents and destroyed the house, that they said, this is what we expect of someone who's been denied their heroin or their crystal meth. This is not normal. No, it's not, but that's what happens when you inject electronic drug into the brain of a developing child with no guidance. So let's not do that. Let's agree that whatever, and you know your children, you know your family, you know your values best. I'm not here to take responsibility for your family. I just want to give you information and resources and skills so that you can help your children make good, healthy choices to function in the world we happen to be living in. If you go off to a Carmelite monastery, Mazel Tov, good for you, you probably won't have to worry. I mean, after a while, using the phone becomes unfamiliar. That's not going to be an option for a lot of us. Right. So, with that in mind, what do we need to be aware of? The tools are powerful. The tools are very addictive. Our young people are especially susceptible to becoming addicted. And what it does is it suppresses their curiosity. It suppresses their awareness of what's going on around them, and it suppresses the value of real human presence. One of the reasons why I wanted to give up undergraduate teaching is because I got tired of interrupting my lectures with the following words. This is the part where you write down what I say. And what? And they seem astounded, they marvel. And I got into the habit of, after opening prayer, we have phone drills. Take out your phone, hold it over your head, shut it off, and then put it under your chair. Because why? Because these kids who were going into debt $10, $20, $30,000 a year for an education, we're all looking down like this, because they assume that once you step in front of a podium, Father goes blind. I also told them I know every sound that Microsoft Word makes, and that's not one of them. Well, they say, oh, Father, I always take better notes with my laptop. That's why I should have my laptop in your class. And I say, great, here's your learning contract. Well, what's this, Father? It says, well, you're going to sign off that if you have a laptop in my classroom, you have to email me your notes before you leave the classroom. And then no one wants to have the laptop in the classroom. I wonder why that is. What do I know? I'm just an old man. I don't know anything about human nature. So, we set limits, and we acknowledge that there are powerful tools at work. And also, we have to keep in mind that this powerful tool can actually separate us. I mean, I've had students tell me that they would rather text their friends because talking on the phone is just too intimate, Father. It's just so awkward. And then I try to tell them about writing letters, and I have to explain to them that it's analog, it's not digital. And I try to explain to them that it'd be a big event to write letters. You know, if you have lousy handwriting like me, you might write out your draft of your letter on Friday, and on Saturday you write it on good paper and you mail it. It was a big thing, and they can't imagine why you would do this. And then they said, but Father, there were no emojis. Yes, well, how did you express emotions in your letters if you didn't have emojis? These are serious questions from people who obviously have no habit of reading good literature. And I don't know, if only there were some cultic way of worship where there was an emphasis on symbols and sights and sounds beyond just words, that would be good too. You could probably build religion on that. What do I know? And then I would say if two friends were taking leave, one of the ways to show that you were really invested in the friendship was you give the person a nice box of stationery, a good pen, and a book of stamps. And I had a student burst into tears. She said, I can't imagine anyone loving me that much. I can't imagine anyone wanting to be part of my life that much. But then they brag about having, 3,000 friends on Facebook. So this technology is teaching us to use people and to love things. To use people and to love things. And to quantify everything. Oh, look, my picture got 900 likes. That's more than the likes that he got. I must be a better person or a more popular person. That quantification of affection and approval and relationship, that's terribly, terribly destructive. I have friends who they have an agreement. It was the whole phone situation got so out of control that at dinner or they're out for an evening of poker with the guys, they stack their phones on the table. Whoever touches their phone first has to buy the next round of drinks. That can be expensive if you're out with the right kind of guys playing poker. But there's no sense of people being present to one another immediately. When I'm locked in like this, I'm communicating to everyone around me, I expect nothing from you. I experience no loss in being apart from you. And I have nothing that you could need or want or deserve. That gets habituated and habituated and habituated. And over time, people can't think of living any other way. That's terrible for relationship, for community, and for young people whom we hope to lead into courtship and marriage and family. So we need to do better. And we also have to understand that unguided, this encounter with technology, that being a public person who's all pixels all the time and not real, you start managing your persona rather than having a life. I'll give you an example. A student of my sister's through a series of strange coincidences, ended up as a young heartthrob on a telenovela down in Miami, and was visiting my sister for dinner, and got an angry phone call from his manager saying, "You haven't tweeted in 20 minutes. Your fans want to know where you are." I mean, I can talk profoundly for hours, but if I had to go every 20 minutes with something that I wanted people to write down, eventually even I would run out of things to say. But this poor guy in his 20s, who's really on camera just because he's another pretty face, he has to enunciate, I'm doing this, I'm thinking that, here's a picture of me doing whatever. Why? Because otherwise he'll be forgotten about. It's like the inversion of the Velveteen Rabbit. It'll become unreal. I was counseling some friends where, sadly, a habit of pornography had intervened in the marriage, and the wife asked me, "What do those women have that I don't have?" And I said, "That's absolutely the wrong question. It's what you do have that's the problem. You're real. You're three-dimensional. You have preferences and limitations and expectations and faults and aspirations and virtue and dignity. All this make-believe sparkling before his eyes, it's not real. We have set up a system that can facilitate the addiction of our children to the unreal, and we need to protect them from that. We want to immerse them in the real and not the unreal. Now, my family lives out on the West Coast, and it is an absolute thrill for me to Skype with them. And I also send my family letters. My little nieces, I've introduced them to cryptography. I put codes in invisible ink and so on. And it's a great thrill to get a letter from Uncle Bob, and they decrypt the code, and they write me letters back in code. And so they're getting into the habit of writing letters, of communicating with family, to get a sense of excitement, to get something out of the mailbox that's not from Amazon. I think that's a wonderful thing. And believe me, I'm an Amazon user too, so don't have any illusions about me. So we can give our children opportunities to have electronics be a part of their life that contributes, rather than being the 800-pound gorilla that dominates. So what are some of the stresses? What are some of the pitfalls of the social media life? And everything I say about social media is also true of video games as well. It's all of a piece. They all work on the same principle. It's flash, it's stimulation, it's novelty, it invokes brain chemistry, dopamine in particular. It's all the same. So what I say of social media, what I say of Facebook, what I say of streaming video for Netflix, what I say about video games, it's all the same. It all applies. One of the concerns of people who are immersed in social media is what we call the highlight reel dynamic. What's a highlight reel? Well, you see this on if you watch ESPN, for example. Here are the great plays on baseball this weekend. Or if you have a sports team, here are the highlights of our season for 2018. It's all the best moments of all the hours of all the games and all the practices. We squeeze all those hours and hours and hours down to just a few minutes. So what do people put on their social media? They put their highlight reel. They put their very best moments, or at least the best appearing moments. And then so you watch people on kind of their first date behavior, so to speak, and they're looking and say, "Wow, my life isn't like that. I wasn't voted prom king or prom queen," back when they used to distinguish those things. I didn't get the participation trophy. I'm not on this fabulous vacation. Wow, their selfie stick must be longer than mine. Did they get all this first? On and on it goes. You have what you end up developing a culture of comparison. A culture of comparison is insidious because it's a reminder that you're never enough. Advertisers have known this since forever. You're not good enough, you don't look right, you don't weigh right, you don't smell right, you don't dress right. But if you have this product, if you wear these shoes, if you put this, that, and the other thing in your hair, or in your mouth, or on your ear, etc., then you'll live happily ever after. Until next season. And then it starts all over again, you know, as the proverb goes, lather, rinse, repeat. So when my sister was working in the fashion industry, and they said, right, everyone knows that the big color for the fall is puce. I don't even know what puce is. I mix and match. It makes it a lot easier. The sister's giving me the thumbs up. Gives me more time for morning prayer, sisters. That's fine. And she looked at me like I was mentally. How could you not know that everyone knows that the big color for the fall is puce? It just is. But then it doesn't stay puce because next year it's something else. Or if you look at the magazines in the grocery counter, because you got the checkout, you know, 700 hairstyles for spring. What planet do they live on that spring lasts that long? Even if you get 3 hairstyles a day. Are you on Jupiter? Always, the people who want to sell you things want you to believe that people are fickle, they're not dependable, and they'll only love you or want to be with you to the degree that you're just right. And that goal of just right, that goalpost is always moving, always being redefined. And so you end up with a culture of comparison that leads to a culture of consumption. And that's why we have people beating each other up for jackets and shoes or for what they're wearing and what they're not wearing. So that's the first difficulty. The second difficulty is what I call social currency. Well, not just I. A lot of people call it social currency. What's currency? Currency is a proxy for what we assign value to. So a certain bottle of wine is selling for $5, another is selling for $50. I'm going to bet the $50 one tastes better. And because that matters to me, I'd rather have the $50 bottle of wine rather than the $5. So that's what currency does. It's a proxy for assigning value. So when I have a podcast or a radio program and I say, oh, you know, the podcast got downloaded X number of times. It's up from last week. Well, that's good. Well, some pathetic verbal sloucher with a record contract got 23 million downloads this year. Father's never going to have that much if he lives to the age of Methuselah. So if my self-worth, if my value is to compare the number of downloads of my podcast to the latest Justin Bieber tune, God help us all, that would be a disaster. This is what our children who don't really know what they're worth and what they're capable of and what they're called to, this is what they do. They get the likes, they get the approvals. I've got 9,000 friends on Facebook. You only have 4,500, so I'm twice as popular and therefore twice as lovable as you are. That's really dangerous. How dangerous is it? There is a phenomenon now called, I can't believe I have to say this, it's called incel, I-N-C-E-L, involuntary celibate. And it's for people who, for whatever reason, can't have anyone to have sex with them, and they express their rage by getting into a vehicle and driving it through crowded streets or shooting up schools. This has happened recently in our own country and in Canada. And you've got people who are online announcing, I've had 3,000 rejections this year. What a busy person he is. My goodness. Maybe one of those 3,000 people might have told him to take a shower and cut his hair and put on clean clothes. But, to quote the prophet, who am I to judge? Here's the challenge. Here's the challenge for us. When we go to a quantified sense of approval, when we go to a calculus of acceptability, we're going to end up with savage competition, ruthless competition, and mania. And if you've got a kid from a family where there's not a lot of love and reassurance and no faith, that the hungers of that heart are going to be fed somewhere. Remember, nature abhors a vacuum. And if the human heart is not fed with familial love and friendly love and the love of God and a community of faith, that hungry heart will not starve to death. It will feed elsewhere. And there are a lot of content providers with bad intent and PayPal and Patreon accounts who are only too glad to take your children's money, time, and soul because that child's hungry heart is not being fed. So in the background of all this is where are the parents, where are the parents, where are the parents? Who's teaching the kids? Who's teaching the kids? Who's teaching the kids? My students like to talk of an acronym called FOMO, fear of missing out. I know, Father, I'm too much into social media, I'm too much into Snapchat and Instagram, and I'm told that Facebook is for old people now. On and on, just like email is for old people now. On and on it goes. And I've even suggested they give up social media for Lent. You would think I was asking them to become St. Simon Stylitis and live on a pillar for the rest of their lives. And I said, Father, I'd like to get away from it for a while, but, you know, I might miss out on something. Well, what are you missing out on now? You know, even if you spent 2 hours a day of screen time, which would not be much in most people's lives, that would be the low end. I mean, we don't spend 2 hours a day eating, unless you're Italian. So what are you doing in those 2 hours, and what are you not doing? I was once counseling an older couple, and the issue was Facebook. And my husband says, and this is a guy, you know, he's retired, he's pushing 70, and he's spending 4 or 5 hours on Facebook. And again, he's not looking at lurid things, he's not looking for high school girlfriends, it's, you know, innocent things, but it's time away from his wife. And my husband says, but it's my right to look at Facebook. And I said, he doesn't need Father's lecture about what rights really are. That's not going to be very productive. So look, if you have an argument about the right to Facebook, that's going to be a dead end. Go up to him and say, I miss you. I miss you. And I need you. And here are all the wonderful things we could be doing together. We have to offer people an alternative because there's this infinite IV drip of addictive substance available 24/7. And it's not only taking over the lives of mature adults who should know better, it's also going to take over the lives of our children. I don't want our children locked in a basement. I do think our children need to be media savvy. I think ultimately they need to be media creators so that we have an alternative to the sewage that's out there. But that's another topic for another time. And then we also want to look at the stress of online harassment. We've all heard sad stories of some poor child being bullied so savagely online that the child commits suicide. What a very terrible thing. And, you know, it's hard enough for adolescent kids to manage their social lives when it's just their peer group. But when it extends to the outside world, I said, look, I tell my students that when you hit the send button, you give yourself a digital tattoo forever. Once you hit that send button, you have lost control of it. It belongs to the entire world forever. You can never take it back, and people can do whatever they want with it. Why would you agree to do that? And why would you let your children do that without supervision? I've had adults who should know better say, oh, Father, I wanted you to buy this thing online, so here's my credit card number, my social security number, my birth date. My client said, you need to write down the following phone numbers. Well, I just sent it to you. This is why Father's stomach hurts in the middle of the night. Because we don't have any idea of how pervasive it is. Absolutely everything we do online is stored somewhere till our Lord comes in glory. Somewhere out there is every photograph, anything you hit the send button, it's traceable to you. And we have to teach our children that too, because it's interfering with kids getting jobs now, being admitted to schools and to military academies. That really funny picture of doing the stupid thing with the malt liquor, not so funny when you're 23 years old and applying for a job. It's not so funny when you're 27 and you've asked Miss Wonderful to marry you and her father has done a serious Google search on you. Oh, and you have to say, well, I do know how to spell the word fraternity after all. Yeah, see, we have to be careful about these things. So what are we to do? What are the alternatives as parents, as educators, as consumers? Well, of course, there's no substitute for being informed. And we have to be vigilant without panicking. Here I want to draw an analogy to the false dilemma of how our conversations regarding immigration is often posed. Bridges, walls, keep everybody out, let everybody come in. Well, which is it? Well, it's neither. No access, unlimited access, which is it? It's neither. It's controlled access. You build walls with doors and windows and you set rules and you set guards and you establish consequences for not abiding by the rules. This seems rather obvious, doesn't it? But yet for different reasons, whether it's immigration or the media, electronic media, bridges, walls. No, it's not no access, because you just can't function. Unless you're going to be a Camaldolese hermit, you go out once a day to sweep the rocks and you go in and pray the rest of the office. Unless you're living like that, and that's not really a common vocation. On bad days, it appeals to me. But here's our challenge, friend. We've got to teach the kids it's not unlimited access, it's not no access, it's controlled access. And until they're morally and mentally and emotionally and spiritually mature, you as educators and especially as parents, you set the rules. And remember, you're there to be your kids' parents, not their friends, and you don't need to be liked by your kids. Pam Stenzel, who is the zenith of Catholic chastity speakers, she's the absolute pinnacle. Pam Stenzel, S-T-E-N-Z-E-L. Just get all her DVDs, get all her books, beg her to come to your school, to your church. She's the best of the best. She's the kind of speaker I want to be like when I grow up someday. And she has a very good book called Who's in Your Network? And she said, you know, I wasn't my daughter's friend when she was 14. And because of that, we're friends now that she's 30. And as parents, you give your kids options. You can either be the kind of parent that enables your kid to someday tell your grandchildren, Mom and Dad were strict and I'm glad, Grandma and Grandpa were strict and I'm glad. Or, you know, they're going to be telling the parole officer or their therapist, Mom and Dad gave me no rules. And yes, they have their free will, etc., but a lot of that is going to be up to you. So fight the tough battles now. Because, you know, when the adolescence shows up and the hormones kick in, their negotiating skills do not improve. So you've got to set that up now. And you got to do your homework. When I was growing up, I was a good but difficult child. I'll leave it to you as to which is harder to believe, whether I was good or whether I was difficult. When I was 5, my mother told me to do something. Why do I have to do it? She said, well, because I said so. And at age 5, I said, Mommy, when you say because I said so, that usually means you don't know why I should do it either. And that's why my mother has a glorious crown in heaven. But you've got to do your homework. You're going to be a lot more credible if you're not just the arbitrary killjoy. Say, hey, Mom and Dad have done their homework. This is a really great, powerful tool. You're not ready to use it unsupervised, and it can really hurt you. So you either play by the rules or not at all. So absolutely never, ever, ever, no television and no computer in an isolated room. It's in the kitchen, the dining room, the living room, with a big screen that everybody can see. or not at all. The kid needs a phone for emergencies, not a smartphone. If I said, hey, I've got this plastic card that's the library card to the world's greatest emporium of pornography, you'd say, Father, no. I said, well, that's what a smartphone is. It's the library card to the Library of Alexandria of pornography. It's the Library of Congress of pornography. It's infinite. It metastasizes every moment. Why would you give that to your child? Don't do that. Phone for emergencies, not a smartphone. And if they go to college and want to pay for it themselves, that's their call. But in your house, no smartphone before they're 18. Absolutely not. And then if you're dealing with a kid who's had a problem in the past, then you want monitoring software. Net Nanny is one good program. Covenant Eyes is another program. So that everything that your kid looks at gets recorded and you get a copy of that record. Don't you trust me? Well, I want to. Trust is earned. It's not a birthright. It's earned. And if you've made poor choices, you've become vulnerable to being reinfected. We can't have that. Because that takes over. You know, if you invite the dragon into your life, the dragon is going to want to be fed. The dragon is not a good neighbor and is never satisfied with being a junior partner. If you invite the dragon in, it's going to be a hell of a battle to drive him out. So don't let the dragon in. What else can we do? In addition to monitoring, we want to create a better online experience by letting online time be a family event. So my nieces Skype with Uncle Bob, they Skype with Pop and Nanny. They don't Skype with other children by themselves. Good. And when it's time to play a video game as a treat, they play Minecraft with Daddy. No unsupervised anything. And then when Minecraft time is over and it's a set time, then you go to other things. I want to recommend a gentleman, his name is Robert Lvov, L-U-V-O-V, I believe, I can write it down here. But he's written about what he calls a nature deficit. L-O-U-V, Richard Louv. He talks about nature deficit disorder. Get your kids involved in nature. One of the things my sister and her husband are doing is, hey, the kids are a little bit older. We've gone from walking in the woods in sneakers to hiking in the woods carrying water in a backpack. They have their Minecraft time, they have their Skype time, and they have a life. And they have fun things they do together. Part of their Sunday family time, they sit at the dining room table in the afternoon and they make art together. They take archery lessons together. They have a life. I know we're so overcommitted and so overstressed that it's really tempting to say, here, Johnny, take the electronic babysitter and go in the corner and leave me alone. I understand that temptation. I've seen it in family and friends. But you wouldn't hand a kid a joint or a can of beer. But you're doing that and worse if you're handing the kid an electronic device unsupervised because you can't cope. Have the conversation with your spouse about we need to rearrange our family life so I can cope, so I'm not inclined to hand over the insanely, infinitely addictive substance to my minor children. We have to have really candid conversations with each other because these are our children entrusted to us by God. God entrusted the children to us so that we can cultivate them to be citizens of heaven, to be part of the chorus, to sing His glory. And if we're too lazy or distracted or stressed to manage that task, then it's time to repent. I was in Panera's several months ago, having a cup of coffee, and I look over, and there's this cute little kid sitting at the table looking really bored and frustrated, and Mommy and Daddy are like this. What do you think that communicates to the child? You need to arrange your home life so you communicate to the child, you're worth my time. You're worth my time. And we may have to rearrange our lives very significantly. Just as a religious is faithful to a discipline of prayer, because we need to say to God, you're worth my time. And if a religious isn't willing to do that, then they need to have a serious conversation with God and their confessor Likewise, we need to rearrange our family life to say, you're worth my time. And you're so much worth my time, my children, that I'm going to be the gatekeeper. See, in America, at least since the late 1950s with the cult of adolescence, we've outsourced the raising of our children to everyone who's not us. Whether it's the radio or the television or the computer or the media or Rolling Stones or the public school. But we've made the peer group the reference point for our young people, and the family is just in the way of the plans and purposes of the peer group. No, the really successful families are the ones who teach their kids, your frame of reference is your family and your community of faith. And we're going to introduce you not only to young people your own age, but to successful, happy, sane, holy adults, so you know what it's like to become a good adult. We're going to give you aspirations and not just contemporaries. That's an important gift for our children. I'm conscious of the passage of time, and I know that I could go on at length. I'm just going to recommend one or two more books, and then I'm going to take questions. There's a book called The Drug of the New Millennium by Mark Castleman, K-S-T-L-E-M-A-N, and it's really an encyclopedia of how electronic addiction works. And then there's a book that just came out called Redeemed Vision by Steve Pokorny, P-O-K-O-R-N-Y. And it's a very good Catholic book dealing with pornography addiction. We live in an amazing age. We live in an age of miracles. We can communicate with friends around the world. We can look at photographs of cathedrals that don't exist anymore. We can hear and watch Fulton Sheen preach with passion. The shadow side of that, the dark side of that powerful instrument, is that it can be soul-crushing, mind-numbing, and addictive. And we have the opportunity, the obligation, the resources, and with each other, the fellowship to teach our children to be good stewards of these tools, of these instruments, rather than their slaves. I think that we can do better, and I think that with God's grace and with the help of one another, we can succeed. I'm grateful for your time and attention, and I would be happy to receive questions from you. Yes, please.
Those last two books that you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
Can you repeat those?
Sure. It was Redeemed Vision by Steve Pokorny, P-O-K-O-R-N-Y, and The Drug of the New Millennium by Mark Castleman, K-S-T-L-E-M-A-N. Are there other questions? Yes, please.
You very clearly outlined to limit for younger children before it becomes a problem. What's been your experience after it's already a problem?
So the question is, it's easier to manage when from square one when you've exerted control. What happens if somebody fell through the cracks and there's been a problem? Well, the short answer is it depends. Let's take a more benign case. Hey Johnny, your thumbs are getting too big, and you haven't walked the dog. That's a relatively easy conversation to have, and you want to be alert to the kind of response. Is it harumphing, or is it like that poor 11-year-old girl in California who assaulted her parents? So that's the first question. Notice the response, notice the resistance, and give an explanation of the controls, the opportunities, the expectations, and also the power of the instrument that you're allowing them to have in your home. They don't have to like it, they do have to live by it. If the kids are unfortunately get involved in something more unsavory, something more harmful, then it can become a moral problem and a spiritual problem. You might have to involve the child in speaking to a spiritual director or a confessor. And if the problem has endured for a time, you might have to seek out professional medical help, 12-step programs, etc. So the nature of Johnny stumbling upon a website that you wouldn't want him to find is different from Johnny going into a closet for 3 hours a day. So the nature of the problem is dependent upon frequency, severity, content, etc. And then depending upon how severe the problem is, you might have to involve both natural and supernatural helps. Yes, please.
Do you have a website that we could get some of this information on to share with us?
Well, if you go to my podcast that I co-host called The Furrow, it's on major podcast platforms, so Stitcher. On 5 o'clock, Monday through Fridays, there is a show called The Catholic Current, where we look at issues of the day. I'll be taking up hosting duties on Thursdays. This coming Thursday, I will be on the air. And if you go to the website for the stationofthecross.com and get on their mailing list, you can get survey questions for each show. And then when I host the show, you'll get a reading list mailed to you. I invite you to listen to that show and call in if you have further questions. First, because we'll be talking about this very topic, and my guest will be my brother-in-law, who has been working in social media and video game design for many years. He's also a good Catholic and excellent father. And those resources can be available to you then. Let's see if there are other questions. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, what is your, you did mention one thing about an older person, okay? I know people who are retired and have been for quite a while. And like you said, they use it instead of going out of the house.
Right.
There's one particular person that I know well, and he actually has his days and nights are all mixed up.
Sure,
He doesn't
sure.
socialize
You're
at
not
all.
aware of the passage of time. And, yeah, let's be clear. The addictive potential is a threat to everyone. Everyone has to be a prudent user of this substance. You know, my mentor in philosophy lived to be 101 and wrote books to the day he died. And by 10 a.m. had read Washington Post and New York Times cover to cover. And he said there were two things that kept his mind alert. He said one was having a glass of red wine every day at 5 o'clock. So I'm liking that. And he also said no television. He said too many elderly people have a television instead of a life. And he was interested, and he was involved, and he was engaged, and he read, and he talked to people on the phone, and he had guests. Somehow, I think everyone's responsible for their own behaviors, but somehow we've let each other down. We've let our community members and our parishioners down. If people begin to believe they have no alternative, that the only way that they can make a connection is through a device rather than through another human being. And I think we have to be alert. Say, hey, we haven't seen Fred in a while. What's he up to these days? And make sure Fred has real human connection. Let's see if there are other questions. Yes, please.
Yeah, with video games, I know you're lumping it all together, but I've had this just say no approach to it,
Mm-hmm.
because I tried to have it controlled, years ago, and it didn't work.
Okay.
Because, they had this half hour, and the half hour goes by real quick, they get better at it, oh, I need more time.
Right.
And it's like addiction, and you can see, boy, they could use 2 hours doing this. They could,
Sure.
and it was like this, we don't need, so it's addictive. So I've been thinking it's like a drug, and you just stay away. But you're telling me that to be controlled about it, kind of let them live with it a little bit.
Well, it depends. It depends. I've never even met your children. I've never been to your home. I don't know what your family life is like. I don't know how old your kids were when they first started discovering the games. My little nieces, they've grown up in an always controlled environment. And so that's not necessarily a representative sample. And if you come to the conclusion that the best thing for your family is just saying no, you have my complete support. I'm fine with that, because you know your family and you know your home situation better than I do. And so there's no implied criticism in your choice at all. There are some people who are, there's some people who say, I can't drink because I don't like how I get when I drink. Okay, then you shouldn't drink, and I'm not going to offer you a drink. And It varies. So the important thing is that you made a choice based on the love of your family, and that's absolutely praiseworthy. And if you need to stick with that choice, then absolutely, I'm not going to second guess you or criticize you in that. There's not a one size fits all solution, and boys can be more susceptible to the stimulation of games than others because they're more visually stimulated, where females are more tactile stimulated. You've got to take all that into account. So I'm just talking at the level of general principles and in an ideal case, and then you have to make the decision for your family and your home. And the fact that you're willing to do that and to stick with it and to do that with love, then you're a hero. That's completely support of that. Other questions? Well, I've been at the microphone for an hour. My bad knee's starting to bother me, so why don't we end here, and we'll end with prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Lord our God, we give you thanks for your goodness and mercy and love. We ask through the intercession of St. Ignatius Loyola that you grant us a spirit of obedience so we may hear your voice and obey your command. And through the intercession of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, may Almighty God protect us from all harm and every evil to reach the happiness of heaven. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Go in peace. Please pray for me. Thank you very much.